Jon Voight, one of the greatest and most enduring stars of Hollywood, is a symbol of resilience in American acting art. His name tied to classic roles that have gone down in film history. He stood out with the role of Cowboy in Midnight Cowboy, 1969, the film that won the Oscar for Best Picture and made him a bright young face in Hollywood, where audiences first witnessed the profound and authentic expressive power of a young actor. Next, his role in Deliverance, 1972, proved his ability to transform into tense, dramatic, and dangerous characters, forcing critics to recognize his outstanding talent. The peak of his career was probably the role in Coming Home, 1978, with a powerful and emotional performance that helped him win the Oscar for Best Actor, Golden Globe, and a BAFTA nomination. Not stopping at cinema, Jon Voight also appeared in many commercially successful films, like Runaway Train, Heat, National Treasure, Ray Donovan, and Transformers, contributing to enriching Hollywood's billions of dollars in revenue. He was honored at ceremonies, praised by the media as one of the Western actors with long-lasting influence and a revolutionary acting style, once becoming a role model for many generations of young actors to follow. These awards and achievements are not only proof of talent, but also of persistent effort for more than half a century in the profession. But behind the spotlight and the medals is a Jon Voight who went through a childhood full of pressure, living in a strict family lacking affection and recognition. The boy Jonathan had to learn how to protect himself, forming a tough but deeply lonely inner self, always craving to be seen and loved. The failures in romantic relationships, the years of distance from his children, and the public controversies with the media created enormous mental pressure, but also forged a resilient will inside him. Jon learned to stand firm against public opinion, endure loneliness, and continue throwing himself into work, with each role being an effort to overcome himself, turning pain into acting emotion. That will help him not only survive the pressures of Hollywood, but also become a symbol of endurance, a model for those fighting against adversity in life, proving that loneliness and mental wounds can turn into extraordinary strength if trained and directed toward true passion. Before continuing, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. A small gesture, but it is your way of honoring a man who has overcome darkness to become a Hollywood legend. Please leave a heart under this video as a token of gratitude to Jon Voight, the one who stood firm amid pressure, loneliness, and losses that few have ever seen. Jon Voight was born in 1938 in Yonkers, New York, into a strict Catholic family where rules and discipline were placed above everything else, and affection was often hidden behind stern faces. His father, who worked hard but rarely expressed love, considered showing emotion a sign of weakness. His mother, though closer emotionally, was too busy with work and life's pressures, making young Jonathan rarely receive praise or acknowledgement. From the early days, the boy felt the mental harshness of his surroundings, harsh words, scrutinizing glances, expectations that were never measured fairly. In the house filled with the soft light of winter afternoons, the old wooden door cracked open to let in bright rays. But that light could not dispel the darkness in the boy's heart. The rustling sounds of newspapers, the steady ticking of the clock, and the acrid smell of burning candles mixed with the musty odor of the wooden floor created a space both warm and cold, where every step and every gesture had to be careful. Jonathan's childhood did not lack basic material things, but he always lacked recognition and unconditional love, things that any child craves. Every time he got good grades or won a game, instead of being comforted or praised by his parents, he usually only received a dry nod or a frown full of expectation. From these experiences, Jonathan learned to be independent, to calm himself before invisible pressures, and gradually built a mental armor to protect himself. That isolation made the boy early realize that if he wanted to survive in an environment full of rules and expectations, he could only rely on himself. In the dim light of the living room, where thin fabric curtains blocked most of the sunlight, Jonathan often sat alone on the hard wooden chair, holding a book or looking out at the empty backyard. The sporadic chirping of birds, the distant sound of vehicles, and the wind blowing through the tree canopies made the house resonate with nameless sounds, as if reminding him of the world out there, where every day was a challenge to survive. On rainy days, raindrops pattering on the old metal roof created strange sounds, and the boy felt like he was imprisoned in a room both safe and oppressive, where light and darkness intertwined, reflecting his own troubled inner self. Day by day, Jonathan learned to observe, listen, and adapt. He understood that if he showed too much emotion, it would only lead to scolding or disappointment from his parents. If he stayed silent, he had to find ways to comfort himself. It was in those silent moments that the boy developed the ability to focus on himself, training his will and endurance, preparing for the challenging years ahead. While friends laughed and played outside, he would pick up scraps of paper, roll up books, or simply stare into space, asking himself questions about his own value and his place in the world. Every step on the old wooden floors, every time his hand touched the cold chair arm, became a lesson in patience and the ability to endure. The pressure from his parents, the strictness in every word and every look, trained Jonathan into a tough and determined personality. But it could not avoid a profound loneliness. He learned to hide his weak emotions, keeping disappointments and unfulfilled longings inside. Even when seeing other children being hugged, praised, and cared for by their parents, Jonathan could only close his eyes, take a deep breath, and tell himself that he would have to build his own path in life. The small room, the dim light, the steady ticking of the clock, and the musty smell mixed with the scent of burning candles created a cinematic scene, where the boy Jonathan, though appearing normal on the outside, inside, every breath and every frown contained silent pain, mental wounds that had never healed, and an iron will beginning to form, preparing for the journey that would later take him to the peak of Hollywood. But at the same time, a life full of tragedy, loss, and untold challenges. Right after the lonely and pressured years of childhood, Jon Voight found a precious silence in the world of art that the boy had long craved. From curious glances at school plays to listening to every breath and every line of older actors, Jonathan discovered a burning passion for acting. He began joining small drama classes, where the dim light of the practice room and the creaking wooden floor became the setting for him to freely experiment with emotions. Every time he performed, even in a small role in class, the feeling of living inside the story, of expressing the desires and pain inside himself, made his heart flutter, and those very moments planted the seeds for the dream of becoming a professional actor. But the path of art was never laid with a red carpet. Jon was rejected many times in casting, in significant small roles, harsh criticisms from teachers and colleagues that forced him to face repeated failures. Each failure brought back the loneliness of childhood, reminding him of the lack of affection and pressure from family. However, Jonathan did not give up. He began training his expressive skills, practicing his voice, learning to control his body and eyes, listening to every sound, every rhythm of the dialogue, every breath of his scene partners, to turn pain and trauma into expressive energy. Each repetition, each failure, brought him closer to finding his true inner voice, learning to use acting to tell his own story, the story of a child who had once lacked love and recognition. Alongside acting training, Jon found in martial arts a way to train his spirit and will. Karate, kung fu, kickboxing not only taught him self-defense skills but also taught him to control his body and mind, building self-confidence and a rare sense of power that his deprived childhood never provided. The harsh exercises, the kicks, the hand strikes hitting the ground, and the endless repetitions became mental training, helping him learn to endure pain, maintain balance between failure and hope, between family expectations and personal desires. Each punch, each exercise was deeply imprinted on his body and mind, reminding him that mental strength is sometimes more important than physical strength. And self-control is the way to survive in the harsh world he was entering. While training and acting, the pressure from family was always present. Strict and sometimes indifferent parents still expected him to follow the safe path. But Jonathan chose a different path, pursuing passion, facing failure, enduring criticism, and gradually creating for himself an image of resilience. His inner self was tense every time he had to prove himself, but that very tension also created strength. Pressure from family, doubts from society, failures in small roles all became material for him to practice, turning pain into focus, turning loneliness into determination. Those evenings, when the lights in the practice room gradually dimmed and the city sank into silence, John often stayed behind, looking into the mirror, repeating scenes of dialogue, expressions, testing his own voice and eyes. In that silence, he understood that the path to the spotlight was not luck, but torment, struggle, continuous training to control both body and mind. Thanks to these quiet but harsh years, Jonathan Voight formed the inner strength, confidence, and courage that would later help him conquer the most difficult roles, overcome all Hollywood pressures, and become a living monument of American cinema. Those moments of silence, tension, and repeated failures did not destroy Jonathan. On the contrary, they forged a Jon Voight who knew how to stand firm in loneliness, who knew how to turn pain into strength and prepare for the eventful life ahead, where the Hollywood spotlight would be the reward for the resilient years the boy had silently fought in the shadows. Right when stepping out of the small drama classes and dojos, Jon Voight entered the real world of Hollywood, where stage lights and cameras offered no forgiveness or sympathy. The first roles he received were only small parts on television, fleeting characters in lesser-known films, and most were ignored by the industry as if his existence had never mattered. Every shot, every line, though thoroughly rehearsed, had to endure harsh judgment, and very few people truly saw the potential hidden deep in his eyes and gestures. Pressure from the media began to increase at this time. Cold reviews, lines in industry reports, and sincere advice from experienced colleagues sometimes became so heavy that John had to face a deep sense of self-doubt, wondering if he was good enough to survive in this industry or not. Each failure, or each unnoticed small role, brought the loneliness from childhood back clearly, reminding him of the days lacking affection, when strict parents rarely expressed love, when every praise or recognition was a luxury. Flashbacks suddenly appeared in his mind, the boy Jonathan sitting quietly on the wooden chair in the dim light of the living room, listening to the creaking wooden floor, smelling the acrid burning candles, feeling each ray of light slipping through the thin curtains, and learning to calm himself. Those moments, though long past, still lingered, serving as a mirror reflecting all the loneliness and pressure he had to bear in the early days of stepping into Hollywood. He began to realize that to survive, effort in acting alone was not enough. He had to learn to observe, feel, and adapt to the surrounding environment. Every filming session, even in the small role, became a new challenge, learning to control his breathing, adjust his eyes, control his body, and at the same time listen to feedback from the director, colleagues, and even the cold glances from the film crew. Those evenings after filming, John often stayed in his small rented room, repeating the shots in his mind, trying each line, each gesture, as if fighting with himself, with the loneliness and feeling of abandonment from childhood. In those days, inner pressure became heavier than professional pressure. John had to struggle with the fear that he was not good enough, that all his efforts would become meaningless, and that the spotlight he had always dreamed of would never come to him. Mixed with these failures were images of the boy in the small room, quietly practicing, learning to stand firm in loneliness, learning to turn pressure into mental strength. These experiences, both painful and lonely, created a Jon Voight with extraordinary inner power, ready to face any challenge, whether the harsh eyes of critics or seemingly worthless roles. Each small role, each overlooked scene, was an opportunity for Jon to train himself, step by step learning to control emotions, balance between disappointment and desire, and turn loneliness into a source of creative energy. The pressure from childhood, from family, from the media, and from himself all blended together into a silent but solid mental strength, helping him stand firm through the difficult days ahead. The harsh early years of his career not only taught Jon acting skills, but also forged his will, determination, and resilience, qualities that would later turn him into a true symbol of Hollywood, a person who could turn every pressure into art and every loneliness into inner strength. Even while walking under bright lights, still always carrying hidden tragic sorrow that few could see, Jon Voight finally stepped into a stage where all efforts, all failures, and every drop of sweat in the small drama classes began to find meaning when he was chosen for the role of cowboy in Midnight Cowboy and Midnight Cowboy in 1969, a role that would later become a milestone completely changing his life and career. From the first bewildered days on the film set, Jon clearly felt the difference between the brilliant spotlight of Hollywood and the deep loneliness still smoldering in his heart. Hundreds of lights on the red carpet, thousands of waiting eyes, and words of praise from the press or critics could never fill the void he had carried from childhood, from the years under strict parental pressure, from the feeling of abandonment that no one saw. Every scene in Midnight Cowboy was a mental and physical challenge. Jon knew that to live true to the character, he had to turn his inner pain into real emotion on screen, making audiences not only see but also feel every heartbeat of Cowboy, a young man both resilient and vulnerable, both stubborn and lonely. Those long nights before filming, Jon would often repeat every line, every movement, studying how eyes, every head tilt, every breath could convey the character's loneliness, hope, and despair. This harsh training was not just skill but a spiritual ritual, a way he confronted himself with feelings of abandonment, disappointment, and emptiness that always existed inside. The emotions Jon went through during the filming process were truly complex. There were moments he felt extreme happiness, when the role was well received, when the first lines on screen were felt by audiences, when directors and colleagues recognized his deep transformative ability. But immediately, that feeling was overshadowed by mental emptiness, by memories of childhood, of losses, and of the distance from his parents that he had never truly made up for. This contrast between the blinding light of glory and the silent darkness in his soul made every success both sweet and painful, creating a mental tension that only those who had experienced similar pressure could understand. Jon did not let the pain make him falter. Every day on the film set, he applied the self-discipline formed from his youth, combining martial arts skills, controlling breath, controlling body and subtle gestures into his acting. Those hours of practice before filming were not just rehearsing lines, but also training the mind to turn personal emotions into vibrant energy, making the character so real that audiences could feel the loneliness and desire even in silent scenes. Jon knew that the success of this role depended not only on technique, but also on the ability to turn his personal pain into expressive power, so that audiences would not only see a character, but also see a part of the real Jon Voight, who had gone through adversity and deep losses. This meticulousness, dedication, and discipline was rewarded. Midnight Cowboy not only made Jon Voight a big name in Hollywood, but also opened opportunities for him to continue challenging himself with other classic roles. Alongside the spotlight, he still carried a loneliness no one understood, reminding him that every success had to be paid for with effort, with fighting himself, and with confronting a past that had never truly been at peace. In the first premiere screenings, when the crowd applauded, Jon stood there, his eyes shining with professional joy, yet deep with silent pains that few saw. And this very combination of light and darkness made his career breakthrough both tragic and grand. beginning a long journey full of challenges, successes, and inner upheavals that would last throughout his life. After the important turning point from Midnight Cowboy, Jon Voight continued into a new and harsh challenge with his role in Deliverance in 1972, a role that not only demanded subtle acting skills, but also a test of physical and mental strength. The scenes were shot in the rivers and dense forests of Georgia, where natural light was weak. The weather changed unpredictably, and the wild natural environment always lurked with hidden dangers. Every shot was a real battle with nature, rushing waters, freezing streams, and treacherous bends where even one slip could lead to serious injury. Jon not only had to maintain high concentration to act authentically, but also had to use his full physical strength to move safely through each scene, ensuring both his life and the expressive quality of the character. This harsh environment was doubled by pressure from colleagues, the director, and the film crew, who continuously observed every gesture, every breath, every eye movement. The tension in each scene was not only physical, but also about the ability to maintain the character's inner emotions. Jon had to find ways to express the character's fear, tension, and survival instincts, while keeping the expression natural and subtle. This was no small challenge for an actor newly stepping into the spotlight, because every mistake could be recorded on film and cause heavy pressure on his reputation. Besides that, Jon's inner self was no less tense, as he had to balance between the pressure of fame, expectations from audiences and professionals, along with the ever-present feeling of loneliness from the childhood years lacking affection. The pressure to prove his ability after the initial success with Midnight Cowboy made him feel exhausted at times, self-doubting, and worried that he was not good enough to maintain his position in the industry. Every scene, every line became an inner battle where Jon had to use his will and maximum focus to turn anxiety and tension into expressive energy, making the character vivid and convincing. The resilience of Jon in this period was clearly shown through the way he overcame consecutive professional challenges. Even when facing dangerous scenes, harsh environments, and mental pressure, he still maintained his commitment to the role, practicing meticulously every movement, every gesture, every breath, and always being ready for every unexpected situation on the set. Jon understood that to achieve perfection in acting, one could not rely only on innate talent, but had to combine it with discipline, iron will, and the ability to endure. Qualities that had been formed from childhood and the training process in small drama classes and martial arts. Throughout the filming of Deliverance, Jon also learned how to transform loneliness and inner tension into creative energy. When standing in the middle of the rushing river, eyes gazing into the distance, breathing heavily, he deeply felt the character's fear, disappointment, and desire for survival. And those true emotions made every scene so authentic that it haunted the audience. These moments not only challenged his acting skills but also trained Jon with a special mental strength, helping him learn how to hold himself steady in the face of professional pressure and challenges in his personal life. What is noteworthy is that although Deliverance brought many advancement opportunities and left a mark in his career, Jon still maintained humility and alertness. He understood that fame was only on the surface and that the resilience in overcoming mental pressures, the ability to endure loneliness and professional challenges were what truly affirmed the real value of an actor. The years of training, facing failure, and surviving dangerous scenes were all accumulated to form the later Jon Voight, a courageous, resilient artist full of inner strength, ready to face every next upheaval in his career and life. The experiences in Deliverance were not only professional lessons, but also proof of the will to overcome adversity, of the mental strength trained from childhood, and of the ability to turn loneliness and pressure into vibrant energy on screen. This very resilience helped Jon Voight continue to move forward, overcome every challenge in the following roles, create a foundation for career advancements, and become a true symbol of Hollywood, where the spotlight never erased the mental scars that had forged the man he was. After the challenges and relentless efforts from Deliverance, Jon Voight stepped into a career-turning role with Coming Home in 1978, a role that brought him to the peak of Hollywood and earned him the Oscar for Best Actor, while affirming his position among the great actors. This role not only required masterful acting skills, but also demanded that Jon deeply portray complex layers of emotions, pain, despair, hope, and love in the context of the Vietnam War, where the character had to struggle with the consequences of war and prolonged inner conflicts. Every scene was a challenge in transformation, requiring him to put his entire soul into the character, utilizing every inner experience from the abandoned childhood, the loneliness, and the pressure from family to turn his own pain into real expressive energy on screen. The spotlight from the Oscar Award and the praise from professionals brought Jon an undeniable professional joy. But at the same time, it could not soothe the mental scars he had carried for many years. Inside the light of the award stage and the admiring eyes from the audience, there still existed a silent loneliness, a feeling of emotional deprivation from family, and a spiritual separation that fame could not heal. Jon realized that although he stood at the peak of his career, the spotlight and admiration were still only the surface, unable to replace the broken relationships or fill the years lacking love. Media pressure began to become heavier than ever. Every interview, every article about the Oscar and the role was scrutinized thoroughly, and Jon deeply felt his responsibility toward art. He was no longer allowed to make mistakes, not only with himself, but also with the audience, with colleagues, and with the legacy of the film industry that he was helping to build. This very pressure made Jon's inner self more tense, sometimes feeling isolated between an admiring outside world and the loneliness inside. Every scene in Coming Home became a double challenge, both acting and a mental exercise for Jon to learn how to hold his emotions steady, turning pain and loneliness into creative energy. He repeated every line, every eye movement, every gesture, utilizing childhood experiences, years of abandonment and family pressure to make the character vivid, authentic, and deeply emotional. Audiences not only saw a soldier returning from war, but also felt every heartbeat of Jon Voight, who had gone through years of standing firm before the challenges of life. The reflection of the inner conflict between success and private pain became clearer than ever. Jon stood on the stage receiving the Oscar, his hand trembling while holding the golden statue. But in his eyes there still sparkled a longing for the deprived childhood, for the broken relationships, and for the long, lonely nights of practice to reach this moment. Professional joy blended with loneliness, the spotlight could not erase personal tragedy, creating a contrast both tragic and magnificent, where professional victory and inner pain existed side by side, elevating Jon Voight into a symbol not only for talent, but also for mental strength and the resilient will to overcome adversity. These experiences not only strengthened his acting skills, but also helped Jon learn how to live with himself, accept that fame and success could not replace the affection and care he had once lacked. He understood that his career could soar with bright lights, but the true person inside still needed to be nurtured with resilience, patience, and the ability to turn loneliness into strength. Thanks to that resilient spirit, Jon Voight continued to face every professional and personal challenge in the following years, creating a foundation for new career advancements and deeply engraving the image of a Hollywood legend, shining brightly while carrying silent pains inside, yet remaining steadfast and true to his art. After the resounding success with Coming Home and rising to the peak of his career, Jon Voight faced another challenge, not on screen, but right in his own life. His marriage to Marcolene Bertrand, the woman he had once loved deeply. The relationship lasted many years, but professional pressures, differences in life views, along with Jon's unresolved personal difficulties from childhood gradually created gaps that neither could fill. The divorce took place in the early 1980s, bringing Jon a sense of failure not only in love, but also in his role as a husband and a father. The the feeling that all efforts and all sacrifices were still not enough, and that the most important relationships in life could still fall apart, made the loneliness in his heart even deeper. After the divorce, the distance between Jon and his children, especially Angelina Jolie, became greater than ever. In the first years after leaving the family home, he could almost not access his daughter and son, because the relationship had been broken and the bitter words from public opinion made reconciliation difficult. Jon clearly felt his loneliness. The Hollywood spotlight could not fill the void in the family, and his soaring career only highlighted the emotional loss he had to bear. Every time he saw other happy families, Jon remembered his abandoned childhood, the feelings of strict parents and lack of care, and those very memories increased the tragedy in the present. In the years of separation, Jon told himself that he had to be resilient to be a support for himself, while learning to endure loneliness and nurture the silent love for his children. He often recalled the days when he was young, when the boy Jonathan had to protect himself, learn to stand firm amid strict rules and emotional deprivation, and realized that those very experiences had prepared him with the endurance for the later years of loss. That recollection was both tragic and reassuring, reminding Jon that even if abandoned, he still had the ability to stand firm, still could love and protect his loved ones in his own way. This emotional tragedy deeply affected Jon's inner self. Pressure from public opinion, criticism from the press, and the feeling of failure in his role as a father made him fall into despair at times, wondering if he deserved his children's love or not. But beside that pain, Jon also found strength. He realized that he could not change the past, but he could learn to love in a sincere and persistent way, even when hurt. These challenging years, though painful, became an opportunity for Jon to develop inner strength, train resilience, and prepare mentally for the later years of reconciliation. In each evening, when standing alone in the quiet room, Jon remembered the boy Jonathan in the dim light, sitting quietly practicing acting, learning to stand firm in loneliness and pressure. That boy had taught him that inner strength was forged through challenges, and that love and responsibility were not always perfectly reciprocated, but still needed to be nurtured with patience and determination. These recollections helped Jon maintain mental balance, learn to accept the losses and continue moving forward, while preparing for future opportunities of reconciliation and reconnecting with his children. The distance and separation that lasted many years did not erase the affection, but deepened Jon's ability to love. He learned to express silent love, care from afar, and understood that a father was not only judged by physical presence, but also by resilience, loyalty, and the ability to nurture his children's spirit. This family tragedy, although painful, was also an important part in Jon's journey, helping him become a mature man and actor who knew how to cherish life, love, and even the pains that had forged the man he was. The years of divorce and family loss not only created deep personal pain, but also forged Jon Voight, a Hollywood symbol not only for his roles or awards, but also for his ability to overcome adversity, hold himself steady, and learn to love despite the hurt, so that later, when reconciliation opportunities appeared, he could gradually rebuild the bridge with his children and find inner peace, proving that even deep losses could become strength if faced with will and patience. After the tragic years from the divorce and the distance with his children, Jon Voight stepped into a new phase of his career, where the challenges were no longer youth or loneliness, but the pressure of age, health, and the harsh working environment of Hollywood from the 1990s to 2000. The roles in Runaway Train and Heat opened opportunities for Jon to test himself with psychologically complex characters, requiring him to control subtle emotions, convey fear, tension, and despair, but at the same time maintain the strength and authority that audiences expected. Every scene became an inner battle, where Jon had to express pain while maintaining energy and focus under the constant observing eyes of the director, colleagues, and the camera, all emphasizing the harshness he had to endure in the profession. In Runaway Train, Jon had to transform into a character imprisoned, enduring extreme physical and mental pressure. The scenes in the freezing and harsh environment made his body tired, but his spirit had to stay alert to convey the character's fear, frustration, and desire for freedom. The pressure from the harsh working environment, combined with health beginning to decline with age, forced Jon to face the limitations of his body, learning to balance strength, emotion, and acting technique. In Heat, the role required Jon to express authority, inner conflict, and extremely high emotional control. He had to maintain the character's coldness and decisiveness, but still reveal psychological cracks, signs of pain, and loneliness. This was a big challenge for an actor who had entered his 50s when energy was no longer as full as in youth, and every scene demanded thorough preparation, solid mentality, and high concentration. In the 1990s to 2000, Jon Voight often had to accept small roles or supporting roles in big films, which brought a feeling of slow fame development and sometimes increased psychological pressure. Every time a role was reduced in importance, or a role was not noticed by audiences and professionals, he had to face smoldering disappointment, the feeling that all his efforts and talent had not been recognized. However, these very challenges trained him with persistent will, the ability to endure pressure, and patience, qualities that helped him hold himself steady, continue acting, and wait for opportunities to shine. Jon had to constantly adjust himself to adapt to the harsh working environment, long shooting sessions for hours, constantly changing settings, facing harsh weather, and pressure from directors, colleagues, and the media. He learned to maintain energy, control emotions, and keep high concentration, turning every pressure into motivation to improve acting quality. Each successful scene was not only a career step forward, but also proof of his resilient ability and silent fighting spirit, a persistence no one saw but helped him stand firm in the competitive world of Hollywood. These years were also when Jon Voight realized that success did not come immediately, and sometimes one had to go through many failures, small roles, and slow recognition. Professional tragedy was not only in roles not being noticed, but also in the inner pressure to prove himself, to balance career and unfinished personal responsibilities with family. These experiences forged in Jon an excellent ability to control himself, knowing how to turn loneliness, disappointment, and pressure into creative energy so that every appearance on screen left a deep impression. Despite going through countless challenges, Jon Voight still continued to throw himself into work, choosing complex roles, finding ways to make every character vivid, authentic, and memorable in audiences' hearts. He understood that professional resilience was not only measured by awards or spotlight, but also by the ability to stand firm, maintain himself, and convey real emotions despite every pressure, failure, and silent loneliness that lasted for many years in the profession. The harsh years of the career had turned Jon Voight into a fully mature actor, both strong in expression and subtle in inner self, preparing for bigger roles and challenges in the following decades. After the harsh years of his career from the 1990s, Jon Voight stepped into the new century with a new journey, where the spotlight no longer shone easily but old age, health, and professional pressure began to cling to him silently. The roles in National Treasure, Ray Donovan, and Transformers were not only opportunities to shine before audiences, but also mental challenges, requiring him to face the limits of himself and the inner strength that had been trained over many decades. In National Treasure, Jon took on the role of a character rich in intellect, authority, but also emotionally complex, where every eye movement, every gesture had to convey the subtlety and inner power of the character, despite age having made his body no longer as agile as before, and his hands and eyes sometimes tired after long days of filming. While audiences saw the light and fame, inside, Jon had to face deep loneliness, with the feeling that every step, every scene was scrutinized and judged not only by the public, but also by colleagues, directors, and the media. That pressure sometimes made his heart ache, reminding him of the years of youth when he had to fight alone with the feeling of abandonment and lack of love, when every effort seemed to be judged only by the final result, not the process full of effort and will. The role of Mickey Donovan and Ray Donovan was a special challenge, requiring Jon Voight to show subtle emotional control, both authoritative and sensitive to inner conflicts. He had to act in tense scenes, sometimes directly facing violent or psychologically complex situations, while still maintaining the naturalness and authenticity of the character. Every scene was a test of endurance, of the ability to focus, and of how he turned loneliness and the pressure of old age into expressive energy, making the character vivid and convincing. In Transformers, John continued to show flexibility in acting, taking on an authoritative, iconic character, but still having to convey emotional depth, especially in intense action scenes. Age made his body no longer as agile as before, but John still resolutely participated in every scene, unafraid of challenges, and maintained his self-discipline to ensure the role achieved the highest quality. This very resilience and never-give-up spirit helped him maintain his position in the film industry, despite every challenge of health, time, and public pressure. Loneliness, pressure from audiences, the media, and even his own expectations became an inseparable part of John's working process. Every filming day, he had to balance keeping his health, controlling emotions, and maintaining focus to fully transform into the character. The scenes that stretched for hours, the dialogue rehearsals and physical training continued to be challenges, but John always saw them as opportunities to prove his courage, will, and resilience that he had built from a lonely and challenging childhood. Although age made many people choose safe roles or rest, Jon Voight still chose challenging roles where he had to face complex emotions, tense situations, and subtle acting demands. This resilience not only affirmed his talent, but also proved an indomitable spirit. He did not let old age or health limit his creative ability, still striving to bring vivid, inspiring characters that left a deep impression in audiences' hearts. The journey after 2000 proved that Jon Voight was not only a famous actor with awards and spotlight, but also a resilient man who knew how to turn loneliness, pressure, and old age into motivation, continuing to throw himself into art with passion, discipline, and iron will. This career, though going through many difficulties, still maintained quality and depth, reflecting a person who never stopped fighting, never stopped perfecting himself, and always chose to stand before challenges to prove his value, both to audiences and to himself. After many years devoted to his career and challenging roles, Jon Voight faced a period full of turmoil in his personal life and the media, where the Hollywood spotlight could not cover the deep conflicts in the family. The relationship with his daughter, Angelina Jolie, became extremely tense after the years of separation. The spotlight and professional success of John sometimes made the inner conflicts in the father-daughter relationship even more prominent. The loneliness from childhood, the lack of affection and recognition from parents now reflected in the way he interacted with his daughter, making the relationship more fractured. The long separation created an emotional distance, where words, actions, and emotions seemed unable to bridge, and efforts to get close or reconcile sometimes hit an invisible wall built by the past and public opinion. Meanwhile, pressure from the media and public opinion became increasingly heavy. Jon Voight was a prominent figure, often making public statements about politics and social views, which led to sharp controversies in the press, social media, and among critics. Every appearance or statement was scrutinized, commented on, and judged, making his inner self tense, like a silent battle that no one saw. On the outside, John remained a Hollywood symbol, respected, but inside, the worry about how his children and the public perceived him, along with the pressure to maintain the image of a father and an artist, made him fall into fatigue and self-doubt at times. John often recalled his own childhood in these tense moments. The boy Jonathan in the strict house in Yonkers, New York, who had to learn to protect his inner self, face heavy expectations from parents, and the feeling of lacking love, now appeared like a mirror reflecting the very challenges he was going through with his daughter. These flashbacks deepened the tragic dimension, emphasizing that loneliness and mental pressure did not begin in Hollywood, but had existed silently throughout his life. Those very experiences helped Jon understand that, to maintain responsibility toward his children, he had to learn patience, endurance, and use all his mental inner strength to hold the relationship steady, even though the feeling of failure and pain still crept into every word and gesture at times. In this process, Jon not only tried to be a father, but also a spiritual protector for his children, finding ways to stand firm amid the storm of public opinion and public accusations from the media. Every interview, every article written about him and his daughter made him carefully consider every word, every action. Jon's resilience was clearly shown when he did not abandon the relationship, but continued to seek ways to connect and reconcile, even while facing harsh public opinion and non-stop gossip. Professional pressure, fame, and family responsibility existed simultaneously, creating a mental weight that Jon had to bear every day. He realized that to be a good father and a complete artist, he had to use every experience, both painful and successful, to train his inner strength and maintain calm before the storms from the public. These silent efforts, unseen and unpraised, were what made Jon Voight a resilient father, a persistent artist, and a person who knew how to stand firm even when fighting with himself and the world around him. Interspersed in these years were quiet moments. When Jon looked back at his childhood, remembered his father's scoldings, his mother's stern eyes, and the feeling of abandonment in the old house. Those recollections reminded him of the value of resilience, of inner strength, and the ability to overcome pain. Although conflicts with his daughter and media pressure still existed, Jon Voight learned to turn pain into motivation, using mental inner strength to maintain the relationship with his children, while continuing to contribute to art, maintaining his reputation, and affirming himself in every aspect. In the shimmering light of Hollywood, Jon Voight still stood there, his eyes containing loneliness and past losses. But along with that was resilience, persistence, and loyalty to family. Thanks to these painful and pressured challenges, Jon not only matured in his role as a father, but also became stronger in his career, creating a foundation for the next steps forward, where spotlight, tragedy, and mental strength coexisted, making a complete person and a true symbol of Hollywood. When stepping into his 80s, Jon Voight had to face new challenges that previous spotlight and fame could not protect him from: declining health, aching body, and difficulties in daily activities. Every morning was a battle with his aging body, joints becoming stiff, aching pains spreading through his back, shoulders, hips, and knees, trembling and tired hands making getting dressed or walking heavy. Sleep was no longer complete. Long nights waking up because of aches or thoughts about family events, conflicts in the profession, and public opinion pressure making Jon lie in the darkness many times, feeling lonely and unsteady in the world he had once conquered. The light of Hollywood still shone brightly outside, but inside the small room, the pain and fatigue became a silent rhythm weighing heavily on his mind and body, reminding Jon that old age was a challenge no one could avoid. Nevertheless, Jon Voight still maintained his work and regular training. Every morning he practiced deep breathing, gently doing basic movement exercises to maintain flexibility and endurance. Maintaining this discipline was not for showing off his body or keeping his physique, but a way he stayed connected with himself and with the profession, to prove that age could not hinder spirit and passion. Even when having to film difficult scenes, facing prolonged working intensity, Jon still resolutely stepped onto the set with a serious spirit, keeping every gesture, eye movement, and voice true to the character. The tragedy of old age was not only physical pain, but also mental pressure, loneliness, the feeling that time was passing quickly, and memories of the past years. From a childhood lacking love to conflicts with his children, all resurfaced in his mind. Jon had to face the fact that professional opportunities were gradually fewer, roles were not as many as before, and fame could not erase the feeling of silent hurt and loneliness. Every day, when getting out of bed with persistent aches and sleepless nights, he still reminded himself why he loved the profession, the value of each role, and the ability to continue conveying real emotions even though his body was tired. Jon's mental strength in this period became particularly prominent. He learned to accept the limits of his body, but did not let them dominate his spirit or hinder his passion. Every scene was a challenge, but Jon knew that if he kept his inner strength, kept his passion, and focused on every small detail, then age or physical aches could not dim his acting ability. This very mental strength helped him continue to stand firm before the light of the stage and the camera, turning pain into energy, turning fatigue into discipline and focus. Jon also found peace in taking care of himself and maintaining healthy habits, from diet, gentle exercise, to spending time reflecting and recalling the past years. These activities not only helped his body become more enduring, but also strengthened his spirit, helping him face old age with resilience, acceptance, and self-love. Although age brought physical limits, Jon still showed extraordinary mental strength, showing that old age was not the end, but an opportunity to affirm inner power and resilient spirit. The pains, fatigue, and loneliness could not break his will. They became material for Jon to continue contributing to art, to continue maintaining the reputation and career he had built over many decades. In Jon's eyes, people still saw determination, an indomitable spirit, and a burning love for the profession, proving that even when the body had weakened, will and passion could still keep a Hollywood legend standing firm amid the challenges of old age. After many years struggling with loneliness, professional pressure, and prolonged conflicts with his children, Jon Voight gradually found a period of peace in his current family relationship. The distance that once existed with Angelina Jolie and James Haven could not erase the memories and father-child affection, and with time, he made efforts to rebuild the bridge with patience and sincerity. The initial meetings, full of hesitation, slow words, and small but meaningful gestures, gradually created trust again. Jon learned to listen without judging, learned to accept the past, and at the same time express silent but persistent love, so that his children could see that, even though the past had many wounds, father-child love still existed. In recent years, the image of Jon with his family became warmer. He joined his children and grandchildren in everyday activities, cooking together, walking in the park, or sitting together watching movies at home. Those simple moments, seemingly ordinary but containing great spiritual value, were where he and his children found the connection that had once been lost. Laughter, hugs, and the affectionate eyes of his children and grandchildren helped Jon feel compensation for the losses in the past, bringing him a feeling of warmth mixed with tragedy when looking back at the years that could not be returned and the mistakes he had once made. Trips with his children and grandchildren, evenings reading books to his grandchildren before bedtime, or participating together in outdoor activities became healing medicine for Jon's inner self. He realized that career and spotlight could not replace family affection, and that the real value of life lay in relationships nurtured by time, patience, and sincere love. Gradually, Jon learned to relax, no longer worrying too much about the public eye or Hollywood's perfect standards. Instead, he focused on enjoying every precious moment with his family, turning ordinary minutes into cherished memories. In the reconciliation process, Jon also often recalled his lonely and pressured childhood, remembering the times the boy Jonathan had to protect himself in his parents' strict house. These recollections helped him realize that those painful experiences had taught him patience, to cherish family affection, and to understand that, no matter how deep the losses and tragedies were, sincere love and care could still heal every distance. The atmosphere in Jon's family now was warmed by simple but meaningful activities. The laughter of his grandchildren, stories about childhood, meals cooked together, and the affectionate eyes of his children all created a balance between present joy and tragic memories, helping him feel the real value of family and kinship. Jon's inner self became more peaceful. The pains of the past did not disappear, but had been accepted, and he learned to find happiness in the present, where what had once been lost was compensated by love, patience, and full presence. On weekend days, when the afternoon sunlight shone through the window frame and the whole family gathered together, Jon clearly felt that simple happiness, the presence of his children and grandchildren, and reconciliation with his children were the worthy reward for the resilient years overcoming loneliness and challenges in life. Those moments helped him appreciate every minute with his family, understand that every tragedy and loss could become a lesson and inner strength, and that ultimately, the greatest value of life was not spotlight or fame, but family, kinship, and the ability to love despite every hurt. After the years of reconciliation with his family and finding peace in his personal life, Jon Voight continued to affirm his position as a true symbol of Hollywood, not only because of his massive career with classic roles, but also because of his long-term contributions to art and society. With more than half a century of activity in the film industry, Jon had appeared in hundreds of films and television programs, bringing audiences profound characters, multi-layered emotions, and full of humanity. The total revenue of the films he participated in exceeded $8 billion globally, in which Midnight Cowboy, Deliverance, Coming Home were considered classic roles, with the Oscar for Best Actor and Golden Globe, proof of his persistent talent and tireless dedication. Jon Voight's career was not only about fame or material success, but also about the non-stop efforts to develop the art of acting, research characters, and seek authenticity in every role. He always chose challenging characters, from psychologically complex roles to those carrying deep social messages, creating a major influence on the acting style of later generations of actors. These roles not only brought awards, but also left a spiritual imprint and the personality of an artist who knew how to overcome adversity, turning personal pain into creative energy and vivid emotions on screen. Besides his career, Jon Voight also actively participated in charity activities and supported his colleagues. He not only donated and joined humanitarian programs, but also stood up to support, guide, and inspire young actors, especially those facing similar challenges as he had gone through in the difficult early years of life. This dedication not only showed social responsibility, but also was an important part of the legacy Jon left behind. Not only art, but also personality and honesty in the profession. Jon Voight's spirit of overcoming adversity was shown throughout his journey. From a childhood of abandonment, loneliness, and lack of affection, to the years struggling with small roles, media pressure, and family conflicts, and then to the years of old age with declining health. Each period forged a persistent Jon Voight, who knew how to stand firm with resilience, who knew how to turn pain and challenges into inner strength and creativity. This helped him become a living example of will, personality, and endurance, not only in the eyes of audiences, but also with his colleagues, those who had been inspired by his fighting spirit and passion for art. Jon's personality values were not limited to art, but also spread into everyday life. He affirmed that career and fame could not replace love, responsibility, and loyalty to family, colleagues, and community. Thanks to this resilience, Jon had maintained a stable career, still choosing challenging roles and conveying strong messages to audiences, from action films to roles with high humanity. Jon Voight's long-lasting influence was also shown through the way he shaped how young generations of actors viewed the profession, not only seeking spotlight, but also learning to endure challenges, control the inner self, and develop personality. The classes of actors guided and inspired by Jon all saw him as a symbol of the spirit of overcoming adversity, a living proof that pain and challenges, if turned into positive energy, could create a solid career and personality. The years of persistent hard work, the classic roles, prestigious awards, along with charity participation and support for colleagues, created a comprehensive legacy, where Jon Voight was not only remembered as a movie star, but also as a resilient person, a father, an artist, and an example of personality, honesty, and mental strength. This very spirit made him a timeless symbol, not only in Hollywood, but also in the hearts of millions of audiences worldwide, proving that overcoming adversity and turning pain into strength was the path to becoming a true legend. Looking back at the entire 87-year journey of Jon Voight, from the days of his abandoned childhood in the strict house in Yonkers, New York, to the brilliant spotlight and fame of Hollywood, his story was a tragic but honoring picture, where the light of success and the darkness of inner pain existed side by side. The losses in the family, conflicts with his children, media pressure, prolonged loneliness, along with persistent professional challenges, all created a journey not easy for anyone to imagine. But it was precisely in those adversities that Jon Voight forged a resilient will, inner strength, and extraordinary endurance, turning pain into a source of energy to continue contributing to art, to family, and to his own life. He taught American audiences an important lesson about facing tragedy, not running away from challenges, not surrendering to difficulties, and not letting past losses determine a person's value. Every role, from Midnight Cowboy to Coming Home, Runaway Train, Ray Donovan, was not only a display of acting talent, but also proof of turning pain and loneliness into strength and vivid emotions, making audiences empathize, be moved, and admire. These persistent efforts, even through pain and disappointment, created a Jon Voight where every step carried the mark of will and determination, not only in art, but also in real life. The big lesson from Jon's journey also lay in the ability to overcome family upheavals and inner conflicts. Divorce, distance from his children, political controversies, or pressure from public opinion were all mental challenges he had to endure silently. Instead of giving up, Jon chose patience, found ways to reconcile, rebuild the bridge with his children, and enjoy the simple moments with his current family. Through that, he proved that family and kinship were core values, and that love, patience, and sincerity could compensate for past losses and tragedies. Jon Voight's career and personal life also sent American audiences a message about moral values and the spirit of overcoming hardship. Fame, awards, and spotlight could come and go, but inner strength, resilience, and the ability to face pain were the qualities that created a truly great person. He had proven that regardless of age, health, or environmental pressure, a person could still choose to stand firm, continue contributing, and inspire. Every step, from the early days in small drama classes, tense filming scenes, to a brilliant career and a healed family, was proof of turning pain into strength and adversity into opportunities for growth. Jon Voight also reminded audiences that career was not everything, and spotlight could not replace the value of kinship, responsibility, and compassion. He combined professional success with charity activities, supporting young colleagues and those in need, to create a comprehensive legacy where talent, personality, and persistent spirit went hand in hand. This very combination made Jon Voight a model of will, dignity, and resilience, not only for young actors, but also for anyone facing adversity in life. Finally, the 87-year story of Jon Voight was a reminder that every challenge, every pain, every tragedy could become a precious lesson if faced with firm will and an indomitable spirit. American audiences looking at his life would see that Hollywood spotlight was only the surface, while real strength lay in the ability to overcome adversity, maintain personality, and continue loving despite pain. Jon Voight had lived and contributed in a way where every step, every role, and every action carried moral value. inspiring all those struggling with their own challenges to realize that even in darkness and tragedy, a person could still shine and become a living legend. Jon Voight was living proof of a life both brilliant and full of tragedy, where spotlight and inner pain went hand in hand. From a childhood of abandonment in a strict family in Yonkers, where parents rarely showed affection and expectations always weighed heavily, he learned to be independent, protect himself, and forge inner strength. Those years, though lonely and lacking love, Jon still resolutely trained acting in small drama classes, practiced martial arts to form discipline and self-confidence. His later professional journey, from the role in Midnight Cowboy that brought him to the peak of fame, to the role in Deliverance that demanded physical strength and tense inner self, or Coming Home that helped him win the Oscar, but could not soothe the deep wounds in his personal life, all reflected the will to overcome adversity, loneliness, and mental pressure. Family tragedy, divorce from Marceline Bertrand, prolonged distance from Angelina Jolie and James Haven, as well as media pressure, had challenged him not only as an actor, but also as a father and a person. Yet Jon still remained resilient, gradually reconciled with his children, cared for his current family, maintained his health, and continued acting, proving that a person could turn pain and failure into strength and persistent will. The lesson drawn for the American people was to never give up in the face of adversity, whether it was pressure from family, loneliness, or professional challenges. Jon Voight taught that spotlight or success was only the surface. Real strength lay in inner power, resilience, and the ability to overcome pain to contribute to family, career, and community. Specific details such as him practicing acting amid the loneliness of childhood, enduring casting failures, and reconciling with his children after many years of separation, all reminded everyone that pain and tragedy could become motivation for growth and to spread inspiration to others, turning a personal life full of challenges into a vivid symbol of will and personality. If Jon Voight's story has touched your heart, please hit like and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next touching and inspiring stories. Thank you for following. See you again in the next video to explore extraordinary lives together, where determination and love rise above every challenge.